So let's begin. I want to thank everyone for coming. My name is Bill Belcher. I'm the Director of Development and External Relations for Ucross. I am happy to have you all here on our February Ucross Spotlight, and we're thrilled to have Natalie and Susan as our guest presenters. I am just going to do a brief housekeeping here. First, to alert everyone that I will be letting people in the waiting room throughout this event, or out of the waiting room throughout this event. So if you see a little cursor floating around, that's probably me. Also, just so you know, this is being recorded. It will be on Facebook Live and on our YouTube page tomorrow as well. We have quite a few people registered on the Zoom, and sometimes when that happens, I ask people to, if their connection becomes unstable, just to turn their video off, just for bandwidth purposes. But right now, everything looks pretty stable, so I wouldn't worry about it. But if that does happen, all you have to do is just stop the video part. You can hear and see everything, but we just won't be able to see your little thumbnail. Also, I just wanted to point out that there'll be time for questions at the end of this. So if you have a question, please leave it in the chat function to the side, and we'll go through and we'll try to pick a few as we have time. So that is really it. So without further ado here, I'm going to pass it over to Steve Jimenez, our executive producer of these events, who will say some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Bill. On behalf of the Ucross staff and our Board of Trustees, a warm welcome to all our guests across the country and around the globe. We greatly appreciate your enthusiastic support of our monthly Spotlight series. I'm especially excited about our program tonight as we're hosting a conversation between two amazing artists and Ucross alums from here in my home territory of northern New Mexico, acclaimed writer Natalie Goldberg and visual artist Susan York. Among other topics, Natalie and Susan, who are friends and fellow travelers in the creative process, will discuss Natalie's new book, 3 Simple Lines, a writer's pilgrimage into the heart and homeland of haiku, which was released last month. Just a few words of introduction about their backgrounds. Natalie is also a painter and poet, and she's taught writing in Zen retreats for the last 35 years. She's the acclaimed author of 15 books, including Writing Down the Bones, which has sold over 1 million copies and influenced writers worldwide. As a visual artist, Susan York creates graphite rooms, massive floating columns, and large drawings laden with layers of graphite. Susan is a Gottlieb and Joan Mitchell Foundation grant recipient, and her work has been shown at the Morgan Library and Museum in New York, the George O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, the Mies van der Rohe House in Berlin, and the Drawing Center in New York, among many other venues. Many thanks to both of you for joining us for this Ucross Spotlight. And with that, I introduce Natalie and Susan.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's really, it's an honor to introduce my friend Natalie Goldberg and to talk with her tonight, especially on behalf of Ucross. It's a place that's beloved by both of us, and imagine many of you. Ucross gives many of us time to sink into the deep quiet of our minds in the same way that Natalie's new book, 3 Simple Lines, A Writer's Pilgrimage into the Heart and Homeland of Haiku does. It's a jewel of a book that she completed at Ucross. And you'll in the book, you'll get to meet Harada Roshi, who's quite a remarkable Zen teacher. And when Natalie sent him the book, even though he doesn't really read English, he said, I read what I could not read. And that just about sums it up. Natalie begins the book by writing, haiku is a refuge when the world is chaotic, when you are lost, frightened, tangled, and nothing is clear. So this seems like an especially good time to be talking about this book. in addition to among her 15 books, her Long Quiet Highway is, her memoir Long Quiet Highway is included in it, and also Living Color, which is a book about her painting, which you should go on her website and look at her paintings. Natalie has, through her marriage in a way of Zen and writing and her life, she's changed the way writing is taught in the United States, but she's also dedicated her life to writing as practice, as a teacher and a writer. And I'm sure that there are a bunch of her students in the audience. Nod your head if you're one of her students. So it's really my honor to introduce Natalie Goldberg.
Thank you so much, Susan. For people who don't know, I used to have classes before Writing Down the Bones came out. I had classes at Don Cubero. In my living room, we sat on the floor, and I was privileged enough that Susan came sometimes, and she was quite the writer, but she went another way. So I thought what I would do is read just a little from the book, since it's so fresh, and then Susan and I can have a conversation. And but I thought I would land everybody, because people have misconceptions about what haiku is. We all think it's just 5, 7, 5, and it's something you do in grammar school or high school, and it's from Japan. But actually, what I found out was people all over the world are writing haiku, and probably a week doesn't go by that there isn't a haiku conference someplace. So I'll just read this part, 2 paragraphs that'll give you a ground. Allen Ginsberg, the poet, first introduced me to haiku. There are 4 great Japanese haiku writers, he declared, holding up a finger for each one as he named them in front of the class in the summer of 1976. We were at Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado, at the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. And he said, Basho, Busan, Isa, Shiki. I remember him using his fingers. No women, I thought. Okay, I'd take the boys on and learn what I could from them. Sure, there were some women hidden in history. He also told us that the formal 5 syllables, then 7, then 5, often taught in Western schools, does not necessarily work in English. In Japanese, each syllable counts. They don't have the and that, those articles of speech. So he encouraged us not to worry about the count if we write or translate haiku. Only make sure the 3 lines make the mind leap. The only real measure of a haiku, Allen told us that one hot July afternoon, is upon hearing one, your mind experiences a small sensation of space. He paused. I leaned in breathless, which is nothing less than God. So that's asking a lot of a haiku. So I went to many, many years later. Well, I'll read a little more to give you a flavor. And by the way, Susan mentioned it, I did finish this book. It was probably the hardest book I've written. People think it's supposed to get easier. It gets harder. You've already up by the mountain and you have to budget to get something out. And I was 2 weeks in 2019 in October, the last 2 weeks in October at Ucross. And I came determined that I was going to pull the book together then. And the truth is, I didn't quite know what I was doing. And I worked day and night there. And then was and then enjoyed the wonderful meals. I'll never forget those dinners. I could name them. I was so excited by them and waiting breathless for that sandwich to come, my only break. So, okay, I met Busan. Busan came after Basho. Basho died and Busan took it over. He was born a few years after Basho died, and he became the great haiku writer that carried haiku through. I met Busan in 1993 when I'd gone for the weekend back when it was funky and cheap to Ojo Caliente, a hot spring spa in northern New Mexico. We rented a small cottage replete with pale yellow linoleum floors, creaky doors, lumpy bed, painted wood knobs on cabinets, and a kitchen with formica counters, square table, and 4 matching yellow chairs, all for $48. I even schlepped in a hibachi for barbecuing steaks on the back porch. Almost as an afterthought, as I darted out my back door for the weekend, I grabbed R.H. Blythe's Haiku, Volume 1, Eastern Culture. Ginsberg had said, "Get Blythe if you want a good translation." When we hit Ojo, I immediately became ensconced in Blythe's haiku book. The first day passed with my nose rarely out of it. This was not the original plan. I was with a new girlfriend. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway. My intention manifested like this. "Hey, listen to this haiku," I read aloud. The lightly freckled Irish skin around my girlfriend's eyes crinkled. Her upper lip showed her small teeth in a half smile. She said nothing. I ignored any signs of discontent. My new girlfriend, on the second morning of our 3-day weekend, realized the only way to get through to me was with haiku. At breakfast, over scrambled eggs, cheese, and tortillas, she burst out, "Kiss me, you fool. Winter is coming." My head jerked up. I grabbed her. But the next day, I was at it again, soaking in the old hot springs, the sun nakedly glaring down, my hair dripping, a wet towel around my shoulders. I opened the book again. In the bottom left corner, a haiku. Ah, grief and sadness. The fishing line trembles in the autumn breeze. October poured through the aspens and over the rocks. I stared into the far distance, then looked down at the page. The haiku was written by Busan. I vowed then and there, in that northern New Mexico hot springs, that if I ever went to Japan again, I'd find Busan's grave and pay homage. It took 19 years before I had the opportunity to fulfill my vow. So I did go, and I write about it. I found Busan's grave, and people think I'm weird that I go to people's graves, especially writers and painters that I love, and I thank them. But it's no different than you going to your parents' graves or your aunt or your grandparents to talk to them. So I have traveled the world going to people's graves. And so I did find his grave, and it was a very odd experience because I felt it was from the 17th century, and I'd never gone that far back, and I didn't know what was there of him, but I did it. And around the grave were stones that clearly were connected. And I found out later, and I tell all this in the book, they were his disciples, his haiku disciples. Haiku is a very communal thing. And he's buried right near Basho's hut. When he found Basho's hut when he was young, it was just a dirt hump. It had disintegrated. So he called his haiku friends and students, and they rebuilt the hut. And they made a promise that once a year, forever, they would get together there and hang out for a weekend and write haiku and drink sake together. So it's a very communal thing. So I found his grave, and I thought I would just read one other short part that I've never read before. And let's see. Oh, okay. Susan mentions Harada Roshi. I studied with a Japanese Zen master for 12 years named Katagiri Roshi, actually in Minneapolis, Minnesota, of all places. And when I was in Japan, he died in 1990. When I was in Japan on this trip to find Busan's grave, Harada Roshi had read Writing Down the Bones in Japanese. And it turns out he was Katagiri's best friend. So he came looking for me. And Mitsue, who's Japanese and who led us around on this trip, had mentioned at the beginning when she picked me up at the airport that someone had read my book and wanted to meet me. And it was so casual, I had no idea who it was. And I just thought it was some student. Not the students are bad. It was just, I was jet lagged. And then at the end of the trip, Harada came. And I asked Mitsue, why didn't you tell me? At breakfast the next morning after Harada has left, I asked Mitsue, why didn't you explain more about Harada-san when you picked me up at the airport in Osaka? I thought it was some high school or college writing student. I almost said no. I see, she laughs. I could have told you more. I ask her how she met Harada. She nods. A month before you arrived, I was escorting a friend of Kaz's to some of the Japanese sites. Kaz had told her about Enku, a wandering Buddhist monk, and also a sculptor who lived in the 17th century. Enku vowed to make 200,000 statues of Buddha. He would work quickly with only one tool. These wooden Buddhas are simple but very expressive. Kaz's friend wanted to see them. So we traveled to the Haida Mountains, where lots of these images were placed at Senkoji Temple. We stayed at a ryokan in nearby Takayama. In the morning, when the innkeeper heard I was a Zen student in the US, he suggested I visit Shosoji Temple just a bit away. He told me that sometimes American students come, that the abbot is open-minded. I walked over to sit zazen there the next morning. I went early, but now the old abbot had retired. His son was the new abbot, and he was not happy to see me. He was busy getting his children off to school, I think. I left. Then in the distance, about 100 meters away, I saw a small monk down the road. He bowed to me out of the morning mist. We walked to each other and said hello. Then he invited me to tea. When he found out I'd been living in the States, he asked me, "Do you know Natalie Goldberg? I'm looking for her." I was shocked and suspicious. At first, I didn't say anything. I didn't know who he was. But as we talked, I realized that he was the retired abbot of the temple. Then I told him, as a matter of fact, she's coming in 3 weeks. I'm meeting her at the airport. So that's how I originally met him. It was sort of a very mystical thing. And I think I'm eager to talk with Susan, but I just want you to hear a few. I curated a lot of haiku. I want you to just hear a few more so you get your head and your mind attuned to haiku and to that little jump in your mind, where you sort of go, huh? And then, ah, huh? Ah, and that space, which we all need so badly right now. Peeling a pear, a trickle of sweet juice along the blade. I've peeled many pears and never saw that before. Here's another one. Unaware the place is famous, a man tilling a field. Then maybe I'll read you just two more. Dear, dear, what a fat, happy face it has, this peony. That's Isa. The piercing cold in our bedroom, stepping on my dead wife's comb. Busan. So I hope I've given you a little bit of a flavor, and we'll talk about it some more. So Sue?
You know, one of the things I love about the book is that it brings, for me, it brought the life of haiku into the present day, not just as whatever we learned in elementary school, but alive and present. And then because you go through the history of it through the various masters, it's as if Busan is alive. You know, it's just really potent, and I think evident of your Zen practice. What's before you is alive. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is you start the book. It's with you're studying with Allen Ginsberg, and then in 1976, and then throughout the decades, you write and you read haiku. But 43 years later, you join the Santa Fe Haiku Study Group as a beginner.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about that? Like what being a beginner means, and then how being a beginner in this context affected you and writing the book?
Oh, it's a great
writing
question.
haiku.
Yeah, people have said to me, actually Kevin Mule, who interviewed me, an old student, said, why didn't you write this book sooner? And what people don't understand is I was reading it all the time. I was really enjoying it, but it never dawned on me even to write haiku. I just loved it and I enjoyed it. And anytime I went to a bookstore, I'd look, and if there was a haiku book, I bought it. But you have to check that there's a good translation, because you could pick up a book of haiku with a bad translation and just hate it, think it's nothing. So it was important. I just read it for a long time. And actually, I tell people, because I didn't know I was going to write a book on haiku all these years. And it's interesting, Sue, what are things that you love, but you don't really recognize it? Do you know what I'm saying? Like Susan's a great baker, a phenomenal baker, but she just does it, you know, and I always get these lemon squares at Christmas, and she'll take on really hard baking projects, but I bet you don't think of it as something to present. And maybe you do, I don't know, but that's it. It surprises me that I wrote this. But now that I'm done with it, I realize, of course. So I didn't write a lot. And I felt really lost writing this book, because who was I to write about Japanese haiku? Even though I was a very deeply practicing Zen student, I'm still from the US. And Japan is very hard to penetrate. I must have read 50 books, and it's hard. There's not a lot of translations of the great haiku writers' lives. And so I would find one or two. And then finally, near the end, I found a woman haiku writer, a really great, who had her own disciples. And there's a chapter in here about that. But as Sue says, I thought, what am I going to do? I didn't know what the book was about. So I thought, I better learn how to write haiku, because I would sort of play with it, but I didn't know much about it. Sure enough, like I told you, there was a haiku group that met every month in Santa Fe. And there's a chapter about it. And I would go, and I was the worst haiku writer. I mean, the worst. We would go around and say a haiku, and you could feel without any comment when you say something and it falls dead, like a dead horse. And but I kept going, and it was fun to be the beginner. It was fun to not know. It was always fun to be the worst person, because then you didn't have to be anybody or know anything. And there was a lot of space. I don't know, I just liked being a dummy. And they were very kind to me. And they would often, as I was walking out, someone would pull me aside and say, you know, in order to learn haiku, you have to read a lot of haiku and write a lot of haiku. And I thought, that's exactly what I tell my writing students. But it was, I don't know, because I loved it so much, it was hard for me to do it, because I had such a high idea rather than letting myself just write shitty haikus. And certainly with regular writing, I fill notebooks with junk. But with haiku, it was holy of holies. And I was also nervous because I knew I would write about the group. And I was afraid they would hate me because they would think I was using the group. But they all said I caught the group. So I was happy about that. But it was wonderful to be a beginner. It was just wonderful.
Because I think most people would be afraid to be a beginner, especially at the point that you're at. I have a lot of respect for that you were just dumb and stupid and empty and went into a class at the library.
Well, the truth is, I'm dumb and stupid about everything. I teach all this writing, and I've written lots of books, but every one I back into by accident. And really, my Zen training was to be dumb and to fail. And one of the Zen students, after Bones came out, said to me, Natalie, Roshi taught us how to fail. And here you are being successful. I said, don't worry, I'll fail again. It's just a momentary thing.
I'm sorry, I was so successful. So how, so the part about, I keep coming back to it, but the part about Harada Roshi is very moving to me, and on a couple of levels. For one thing, when you wrote about Katagiri and his relationships with students, that was a big, in the Zen world, that was especially a big thing. And Harada said, one of the things I really, I'm just paraphrasing this, but one of the things I really deeply respect about Natalie is she's honest. And I think that goes through all of your writing, but to hear that from Harada Roshi, especially in that context, must have been a very powerful moment.
Yeah, Susan is referring to Katagiri Roshi, who I love very much. I wrote a glowing memoir about him, Long Quiet Highway, in 1992. And then later on in 2004, I found out after he died that he'd had some sexual relationships with students. And I had to finish the memoir. So I wrote a book called The Great Failure. And I still loved him, but he came down to earth. And everyone hated me, the whole Zen world. No one talked to me. That's the way you do it in Zen, silence. And everyone knew about it, but they didn't want it out. And I think it's a very good book, but it was very painful, really. And Harada and I emailed each other when I came back to the States, and Mitsue would translate. And Harada asked me, what was Katagiri like as a teacher? Please tell me. And I had to write simply because Mitsue always had to translate. And so my first paragraph was glowing. And then I thought, I have to tell the whole thing. So I said that I had loved him, but I had to tell the truth. And I had to really look at him. And, I told him about the great failure and that everyone hated me. And I pressed send, and I was afraid I would lose him too, because I lost everyone. And it was incredible. He wrote back and said, "Thank you for being so kind to my friend." And he understood. He really understood, which was so different than the Americans. The Japanese have a whole different concept of things, I think. And it was
Do you
important.
think that's in general, or do you think that's Harada Roshi? Because he just seems like a remarkable.
Well, he is remarkable. He is remarkable. We didn't mention that he's 83, and and he traveled to meet me in Kyoto. And then in the second half of the book, I go back on a Basho, following Basho's trail, and we go to Takayama. And he's just incredible. He drives around in a car, and he's got this big cell phone that he's playing with all the time. And you're right, he's exceptional. But I'm a little bit into thinking that there's lots of exceptional practitioners over there that we don't know about. I hope. And there are here too. But yeah, he probably is exceptional.
Yeah, I hope so too. Could you just, for a moment, just reiterate what he said about the book, just when you sent it to him? Because I did a little thing on it, but maybe you could tell the story, because
Well,
I think it's quite moving.
Well, he's been waiting for the book. He was very excited. And he, as soon as I got it, I FedExed it overnight to Takayama. You could imagine how much that cost. And he was very excited, but he doesn't speak English. And Mitsue wasn't there to translate. But about a week later, he wrote a long email to Mitsue. Mitsue translated it. He caught the whole book. He caught about Ginsburg. He just caught the whole book. He understood it. And both Mitsue and I said, how does he know this? And she wrote him back, and he wrote back and he said, I read what I cannot read. I read what I cannot read. And then a few weeks later, we had a Zoom, and where Mitsue, it was a 3-way Zoom, and he was very excited. And I think what he said is, Natalie, you took Basho and Katagiri on this trip, and you got Zen, Japanese Zen, the way Japan understands it, not American. I don't know what he means by that. But then he also said, I'm going to read the book again, but this time it's going to take me 2 years, because I'm going to sit with an English dictionary and read every word. So, it took me 3 years to write the book. Someone is going to take 2 years to read it. I like that. But he is remarkable. And it's almost, I can't bear it because he's in Japan. I can't go over now. And he's getting old. But he said to me, I will live to read this book. And he's very, very alive, has tremendous energy. Look, he was looking for Natalie Goldberg. Anyone he met, he said, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Oh, you know what? I don't know if you all know Joan Halifax. I don't know if you could see this, but this is Harada, me, and Joan. There he is. He's pretty beautiful. Yeah. I'm so glad I thought of that. Yeah, yes. That's Harada, and that's Joan Halifax. So.
Well, I'm hoping there'll be another book that'll have more of him in it. No
Like
pressure now.
Natalie, yeah.
Um, so you wrote about discovering Chio Ni, the female haiku writer, and you also wrote about how her work evolved throughout her lifetime, depending on what had happened in her life. I'm wondering for you now, how you've noticed how the arc of your work has shifted throughout your life.
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
We have Maggie to thank for that one, actually.
Oh, Maggie is Susan York's daughter, who's wonderful and majored in English literature or American literature, and used to be my writing student at prep. So every Christmas I get to see her when she visits her parents, except this Christmas. So I've changed. I had such a need for people to do writing practice, to wake people up through writing practice, and, sort of a back way into Zen. But now, certainly my last 3 books have nothing about writing practice. I've left all you students behind. I mean, I have in other places, but yeah, I wrote the 3 last books in 5 years. And actually it was when I had cancer and then got better. I wrote about probably living and dying. And I'm forming another book in my mind, and I keep thinking, no, it's too hard. And but Maggie is right. Something has been unhinged. I'm no longer, I gave you all writing practice in some of my past books, not all of them. There's other books, there's memoirs and stuff, but if you read my books, you can get writing practice. And I've unhinged and I'm going in different directions. My book before this was about me and my partner having cancer at the same time. And the book before that is essays. So I'm unhinging maybe from being the teacher, even though I love to teach. I really do love to teach. I could really ask that of you, Sue. How has your work? And I want to say, Sue, that you said it was brave of me to be a beginner and go to the haiku group. But in the old days, you were really gung-ho about writing, though you were a visual artist. Is that why you don't write anymore? Or do you write? Am I putting you on
write
the
a little,
spot?
but I used to spend before I went to grad school, I would spend half my day writing and half my day in the studio. And I spend more time drawing now and making sculpture than writing. But now you're making me think I should start writing again.
Well, and here I go again, being the teacher, wanting to pull people in. Sue, could you tell how your creative, how it evolved? Let's turn around Maggie's question to you. How has your art evolved?
Now that is a good question.
Isn't it a killer? You can't wait to get my hands on it.
I'm so glad I asked you that question, not to be asked it of myself. I think, I don't know, I know the work has evolved, but I think I've become more aware of, Natalie and I are both longtime Zen students. We've both in our adult lives practiced Zen since our 20s. And I think it's taken me a long time to realize how much that practice is a part of my whole life, but a part of my studio practice in the way that it's a part of your teaching practice and your writing practice. And so I do a drawing every day, no matter what. And I cover whole rooms in graphite. The repetition is it's the way our breathing repeats, my hand repeats. It's very connected. And now I'm starting to think about working in a couple of other materials, so I'll be a beginner again, and it'll be interesting to see what evolves from that.
Uh-huh. Well, I want to say that Sue, which I love, she does a drawing a day. Now you think, oh, a drawing a day, I could draw this bottle. That's not so hard. She does like a major drawing every day, and then she dates them. Sue, and that's a real practice. I have students who do writing practice every day. I also have a student, Beth Howard, who I talk about in the end of the book, who did a haiku a day for a year in an intensive with me, and has just continued. So Sue, do you by any chance have any of the drawings that you could just show us a few so they know what I'm talking about?
I think Bill has some of those if he's there.
Bill, are you still here? Uh-oh. Did Bill leave?
I am.
Oh,
Hold
good.
on.
Okay. Okay. Different haircut.
Yes, I have my pandemic hair right now, so it's longer than it's been since high school. Are they just going forward? So
They are, but you if you want me to stop them, just let me know.
Yeah, could you start at the first one, stop at the first one for a moment?
Sure.
This is just me drawing basically, and I think at this moment I have a zafu under me, which is what we use in the Zendo to sit on, but it's usually quiet in there, and I'm just going over and over this drawing with graphite. This was for a project I did at the Drawing Center of their foundation, and this is a drawing of one of the foundation stones. Could you go to the next one? So this is a project I did at Ucross. It was on view at the museum, and many of you, I'm hoping many people in the audience are Ucross fellows, and I would ride, as soon as light came, I would ride my bicycle to my studio and draw a circle. And it took me until about you can't really see this in the drawing, but it took me until about the 15th circle before they were round. It was just practice. It was just drawing over and over and not worrying about what it was going to look like. It was just the present moment. Could you go to the next one? So I was there at Ucross for 26 days, and those are the circles. So this is the 26th circle, and you can see that it's pretty round. And when I got back to New Mexico, I then made a 3-dimensional sculpture of each drawing. So the circumference of this sculpture is exactly the same as the circumference of the sculpture. But I would kind of obsess about getting it just right. the view of it, and Mary Scully, who I think is watching, is a curator, and she said, you're never going to get it right, adjusted right, because it's the difference between 3D and 2D. And I think she's right, but I'll still do it till my dying day. Could you do the next one? Nat, were you going to say something?
Well, no. I think you answered.
This is a close up of the sculpture.
It's
and
beautiful.
They're solid graphite.
It's beautiful. I want to bite into it.
Yeah, it's like that. You want to just lick it. It's so alive, that material.
Yeah.
Next. And then these are the daily drawings that we were talking about. And it's just, I like writing practice. If you don't do some kind of daily practice, I really recommend it. There's something about it that it evens out your life in a certain way. It's not like jumping off a cliff every morning. It's just walking on the next flagstone. And like what Natalie said, as being a beginner, it's, you don't worry about what you're going to do. You just make it no matter what. It doesn't have to be good. It's no good, no bad. You just make it.
You meet yourself.
Next.
Sort of when you do a
Yeah.
practice, you kind of, we have such scattered lives, but if you do a practice something each day, you get to meet yourself each day. And oddly, I don't know if you find this, Susan, we're different each day, but we give a structure to that difference. Does that make sense?
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Next. There's just some more of the daily drawings. This year I've been drawing the COVID virus.
Oh,
And then there's next.
oh, that's beautiful.
This was at the O'Keeffe Museum.
Those two on the right and left are Sue's graphite.
Yeah.
We know graphite as a pencil. And look at that great squiggle on the floor at the O'Keeffe Museum.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, we don't appreciate
friend Larry-
graffiti enough. It's in Santa Fe. It's a beautiful museum.
Yeah. My friend Larry Fodor just put the camera on the floor to shoot it. It was because we couldn't bring a tripod in. It was such a great solution. And then there's one last one that I think that shows.
Oh, yeah.
You can see on the right O'Keeffe's painting, and then it was a combination of O'Keeffe, Stieglitz, and my work. But there's in Natalie's book, she tells the story of how at the end of O'Keeffe's life, she had her attendant read haiku to her from Blythe's book in the evening.
Yeah,
And I love that.
In Abiquiu.
Right?
Yes.
In Abiquiu, in her bedroom up above the road.
Yeah.
I love that image.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It was beautiful. And if you go to her studio, she has, she's very austere, but there is a few things like a rock and then Buddha's hand that she got when she was in Japan. She didn't travel a lot, but I think she traveled deeply. And actually, there's something, I don't know if this fits, but I'm thinking of a haiku. You should hear a few haiku by Chione, the woman haiku writer, because you've heard some men.
Oh, yes.
Let me see if I can find some. Oh, yeah, here they are. Twilight is left in the maple leaves. But I'll give you some more sexy ones that she has. I don't know why I should think that women should have sexy ones, because the boys won't let themselves be sexy on the page. Let's see. Till his hat fades into a butterfly, I yearned for him. And here's another one. Women's desire, deeply rooted, the wild violets. And this one that I really love. Listen, everybody sit up straight. She had a moment of real inspiration, of seeing deeply, and she expressed it in a haiku. Clear water, no front, no back. Clear water, no front, no back. And it's in here. And, for me, the book in the end, Sue, I did, after studying with Alan in 76, in 1990, I got to teach with him. And we taught in LA twice with 600 students each time. And we became friends. And I didn't realize, just like I backed myself into writing this book, I didn't really realize what the book was about. After I finished it, 2 months later, I thought of an epilogue. And I thought, no, Nat, that epilogue has nothing to do with the book. But it kept coming, so I wrote it down, and it worked. And what I realized, the epilogue is about Alan dying. I just mentioned Alan at the beginning and then at the end. And I said, and I realized the whole book was an homage to Allen Ginsberg, who had turned me on to not only haiku, but he's the one that put together for me the idea of writing and the study of mind. What are the equipment a writer has? Pen, paper, and the human mind. The more you understand it, the more you can work with it. I always say to Sue, oh, you visual artists, it's too much equipment. She's not afraid of equipment. I can't stand if I have to carry something. I don't want to carry anything heavier than a notebook. So at the very end, in my epilogue, I'll read you one haiku that I wrote, and I wrote it for Allen Ginsberg. I can open the page. No, that's the wrong page. Allen Ginsberg, far beyond 17 syllables. Allen Ginsberg, far beyond 17 syllables. So.
Wow.
Should we open it
I
up
have another,
to questions?
yeah, I have another question, but maybe we should open it up.
Oh, I'm dying to know what your question. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so there's been chat going on, which is nice to see. If anybody has any questions, feel free to send them in. I would just sort of open it by asking you to talk a little bit about your experience at Ucross. You talked about the daily practice, certainly, but what is the time, space, and sort of opportunity for contemplation at Ucross? What has that provided your creative process and practice?
For me, well, I finished that book. I kicked ass. It wasn't this kind of dreamy, you know, where I did ride that wonderful bicycle, but the only thing I did, I was in the music, that beautiful house, a little bit away. And the only thing I did was I'd shift from the living room, I'd shift over into the backyard and back and forth and back and forth. And I did write a few haiku and looking for the lunch to come in the little bag. I loved it there, and I want to go back when I could take in Wyoming and Ucross, because I'd never been to Wyoming before, but I was kicking ass. But it gave me the space to do it. It was sort of like, go, 2 weeks, go. And I did, I went. And then I would have those dinners. I mean, I remember the first one, I almost fainted. The roast chicken and the wild rice and the squash, the baked squash, and the desserts. You know, I was very good all day, and then I went wild at dinner. And then I went back and worked. So I just kicked ass, frankly. But it gave me the structure to do it.
How about you, Susan, with the 26 days you said?
Oh my God, it was the best 26 days. I'm sure those of you who were in the audience who were fellows know the feeling of when you open up that door at noon and there's the sack lunch from Cindy and you don't have to talk to anybody. You just keep going. You can go the whole day without seeing anyone or talking to anyone, just doing your work. And then at night, this community, I got so much done there, but I learned a lot too. And I think Steve will remember that when I talked about my residency at the board, my most potent memory is the sound of the creek thawing. That sound as the water began to run through it. It was, I think Ucross gives such a profound gift to all of us to be able to do exactly what we're here to do, and to support us in doing it, and to feed us such amazing food. Natalie and I, if we were cookbook writers, we would write some homage to Cindy.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Susan.
Well, there's a lot of love and thanks in the chats coming through. There are no other questions, and I think it's we can
Oh.
wrap up if there is, if you have any final words before we wrap. Go ahead.
I have one thing to say. This year's been such a challenge for the whole world, and for a few of us, there have been some gifts, and Natalie and I this year decided to go on a walk together every week. We'd put on our masks and go walking. We'd just kind of go wherever we wanted. And we've known each other for decades through writing practice and being Dharma sisters. And so since both of us have studied Zen for so long, partway through our walks, we usually find a bench or a rock or the ground to sit on, and we'll meditate for a while, no matter where we are. And that's been such a gift to me to be able to do that. And in a way, it's a natural thread right into where we are right now, I think. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And get the book. It's a beautiful book.
Well, this has been wonderful, and I think a gift to all of us. So I want to thank you for being part of our Spotlight series, and I want to thank you for the great conversation. Of course, I, being the Director of Development, also want to thank our sponsors of the Ucross Spotlight series. It's a series of events that we started last year, both in person and, of course, virtually after we needed to. And we have continued that this year, and we have a series. We actually have 3 more lined up. The next one is on March 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain, with the performance artist John Kelly. And we'll be announcing others along the way. So I hope everyone on this Zoom will join us for that one on March 25th. I also want to thank the sponsors, Deb and Ed Kaler, Steve Jimenez and Miles Ferris, Carolyn Easton, Jim Rubin, for helping make this possible and helping us keep it going over time. We really appreciate all that they do. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Steve for some last thoughts here.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment for a moment, Natalie, when you spoke about kind of unhinging yourself, which I really loved. It reminded me of something, Susan, that you didn't mention, but when you did speak to the board, what you said about your experience at Ucross was that you went there with an idea to do certain work, and that you said it was like falling off the cliff, and you ended up not doing any of the stuff that you originally planned to do. And that has really stayed with me. So I just wanted to thank both of you for really talking about being unhinged, the importance of that. So just thank you on behalf of everyone at Ucross, and thank you for being part of this community.
All right. With that, everyone,
Really
this
a
will
gift.
so be online tomorrow. It will have Andy Ucross's YouTube page if you want to share it with friends afterwards. What a terrific discussion. All right.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.